Hey there, Joyful Rebels here, and we are so excited to be with you here today for the start of season 2 of the Joyful Rebels podcast. As always, we've got Claire and Donna on the mics, and today we have an interesting topic. It's our take on how we think about New Year's resolutions. But
Mm,
really quick, I wanted to take a second. I had some people reach out and ask, when's season 2 starting? When's the podcast coming back? And giving us some feedback on season 1. And I love it. I mean, honestly, that really lit me up and got me excited to keep going on this journey. And Mom, I know we love doing it. We,
hmm
kind of have these conversations no matter what. But just to know that people are out there and appreciating what we do. And, here we are starting with season 2. So we're excited. We're going to get back into it. And because of the new year, we're going to talk about New Year's resolutions. Now, some people might think, oh, good, great, motivating. And it runs that spectrum to, oh, evil, like bad words. So, Mom, you've had, decades of experience in the fitness industry. So I'm
hmm
just curious when you hear New Year's resolution, like what's your perspective on that whole thing?
And it's so loaded, so loaded.
Yeah.
One thing to back up, and you made a great point in the beginning, Claire, of, we're starting season 2. We've gotten some great feedback. We're having these conversations anyway. And I think it bears a quick review because I feel more committed, and I know you do too, that to look at what we're doing here and how we're distilling the information from. There's a lot of conversation that's in the field of actionable self-care, of mental health, of wellness in general. There's a lot of it. I love that. There can't be enough. So there's a lot of that, a lot of it that's out there, but conversation is conversation. Cool. What we're trying to do is take it from conversation, pull it down so that we have awareness, and the points that resonate with us, we make them personable. Is that the right word? That's not even the right word. Make it personal.
Personal,
Yeah,
personal.
we make it personal, but the bigger thing is then it brings it down so that there's just a couple of things that we can focus on and then act on. So
Mhm.
I want everybody to really kind of put that filter on and have a grounding point that when you hear information, it can sound sort of familiar. You're like, oh, I've kind of heard that before. Cool. That's a good thing. And that can also be a challenge because when things fall in a familiar category, it can sound like kind of white noise or it's familiar. That does not mean we're doing one thing about it. That just means that we've heard about it. We've listened to other podcasts. We've read other things about it. So that you're on high alert when you hear things, and then you start seeing like, how does that work in me? Because we simply cannot, with the amount of time that we have during the day and bandwidth and just how we're living our lives in Western culture, address every single thing that our heart desires. We have to prioritize and go, this is important to me, this makes sense, and I'm going to act on this. So we're really trying to take ideas and bring them down so that you have 1, 2, or 3 things that really speak to you that you can do something about.
Mhm.
Because the little tiny things that you do something about change your life. So we're taking it from concepts, pulling it down to personal and awareness points, and then that goes into action. So don't lose the sight line of the road that we're on. So we're always trying to, every time you hear something that sounds familiar, you're like, how does that live in me? And
Mhm.
that's what I'm doing too. So when I hear the information, I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. I might have heard it 10, 20 million times. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but how does it land for me in this season today? And I love that we're talking about resolutions because there is a lot of energy around that. To Claire's earlier point, I've been in the fitness industry about 30 years, give or take a few. And this time of year has a lot of energy around it, especially for that particular industry. And what I've appreciated and also have bristled with is that we have braced for it. Like it's kind of a bad thing. Like there's going to be newer people that are coming into facilities to work out. There's conversation around that. But the biggest thing that I take away from your question, Claire, is expectation. That the expectation around resolutions is that A, you're going to have them and that they're not going to work,
Mm.
and that there's going to be this really temporary, transient feeling about it, where I don't believe that to be true. Because I have watched over the decades that I've been involved with working with individual and groups of people that stick to stuff and they make changes. And it's so incredible and it's so energizing. And maybe that's why I've been in the industry this long, is because I believe there's more of that than the people that have the fits and starts and just peter out. That's okay. There's a lot of prep time that goes into actually making a change. And so I want to give some props and some shout outs to that pre-contemplative phase.
Mhm.
So we would anticipate that there'd be this boom January 1 in the gyms, and that was never the case. It would be more like end of January, beginning of February when we'd see an uptick in attendance. And we'd be shocked for like the first X amount of years. We'd be like, where is everybody? They're thinking about it. They're
Mhm.
thinking about it. And that is valuable, very valuable time spent, because you have to be able to figure out what you think about it, prioritize, make it personal, like all the things that we're doing right now. We're actually in pre-contemplative phase before you take action. So I have watched that timeline play out without knowing what was happening behind the scenes. So I want to say yay to everybody that's still thinking about it, whether they're listening to it in real time, which is now, somewhere in January of 2023, or you're listening to it later and you just happen to be making some kind of resolution for this chapter of your life. That works too.
Mhm.
So again, there could be expectation about it. So what happens if we all just kind of say, well, this year it can be different. We'll look at it a little different way. I'm not going to hold myself to incredibly high standards, but we'll give you some tips, tricks, and hacks in order to make this more of a fun process. And let's see what happens. Because, people are like, this is your year. I'm of the mindset, every year is our
Yeah.
year. Every year is our year. And this year
Yes.
we're going to do things that will definitely surprise and delight ourselves. And I don't even know what that's going to look like, but I'm open to it. So
Yeah.
to you, Claire, and to everybody listening, the first question is, are you open to it? Are you open to having this be your year where you're receiving information, you're willing to put yourself out there, try some new things, and just see how it goes? Because who knows what it's going to look like, and it could just be awesome.
That feels good. I am open to answer your question. Um,
Cool.
and I love how you talk about that pre-contemplative state because so right now we're in about mid-January, it's not the first week of January and we're still talking about resolutions because that feels good. That feels good to not say, okay, January 1st, I had to make a list and I had to start planning out my whole schedule. And, that feeling of being rushed and throwing something together, like that just starts off not feeling good. So
Totally.
the fact that you can take your time, right, put in that pre work, and really start to uncover things like uncovering your why. And that's what we'll start to get into when we talk about how we're thinking about New Year's resolutions. So someone like me, I like to know the history of things. So I just started doing some research on, history of New Year's resolutions. And they find some evidence that 4,000 years ago, the ancient Babylonians were doing what they would consider resolutions. And, interesting that that long ago, the new year wasn't January, it was actually March, because that's when
Mm,
they planted their crops. So, okay. But they
mm,
would make promises to the gods that they were going to pay their debts and then they would get favors. So it was this idea that it's the start, a fresh time of year, and we're going to make amends and we're going to, make new goals for the coming year. Um, 46 BC, you got Julius Caesar. He was like, okay, the start of the year is now January. And it had to do with the god Janus, this two-faced god. He could look behind and in front. So it's this idea, the turn of a year, you're reflecting on the year that you had, but then you're moving forward to looking ahead. And so I think that, it does feel natural when you've got this new year to want to reflect again on how the past year went, but to focus on the new year. So again, that's not to say that if you're feeling motivated at any time of the year, go for it. You can start your goals whenever you're motivated. Like you have that permission, but this is as good of a time as any. So a survey in 2021 was like looking at all the New Year's resolutions that people have, and they lumped them into kind of 10 categories. And this is coming from some work by Tony Ewing. Think if you've had resolutions in the past or if you have your current one. So like put that top of mind, see if it falls into one of these categories. One, exercising more. Two, losing weight. Three, organizing better. Four, learning a new skill. Five, something job related, improving your job, getting a new job. Six, saving more, spending less, so financial. Seven, quitting smoking. Eight, spending more time with your friends or with your family. Nine, vacationing more. And 10, reading. And I feel like every resolution I've ever had falls into those 10 categories.
totally.
But we can see right away that most of those are health related. So a lot of these resolutions are focusing on our health. That's interesting. So again, if you have a goal that you've decided is going to be something you're working on in 2023, does it fit into those 10 categories? So what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on, again, we called this episode how we think about New Year's resolutions. So what we're going to talk about is maybe a not so great way of thinking about or framing your resolution, and then how we think you can do it better. Because again, you've got this time to contemplate the goal and the resolution that you have. You've got some time. There's no rush. So if we can do this pre-work again, put in this thought beforehand, it's going to set us up for more success. Because that's the whole point of this. If we can frame how we're doing it in a positive way, we want to be more successful, right? And Mom, like you said, we hear a lot, oh, people, the majority of people don't reach their goals. Okay, well, how can we be more successful? I don't even know if I buy into that, but how can we set ourselves up for it? So number one, a not so great way to frame your goal is when you're focusing on just what you're doing. So just what the activity is, not what you're thinking about or thoughts behind it, but just what you're doing. And the suggestion is a better way to think about it is to get your mind involved, even to get your emotions involved. So for me, that's really narrowing it down or focusing on my why. So it's not just, oh, I want to exercise more. Oh, I want to save more money. And we've talked about this last season. Ask yourself, okay, that's your goal. Why? And then whatever your answer is, I bet you can ask yourself again, why? Like we're really distilling it down to what it comes down to, what's really personal to you. Because what can happen is that the activity that you're trying to do, the habit you're trying to start, when we start getting into, it being repetitive, the motivation is going to fizzle out. It just is. That is extremely natural. But if you can hold on to that main important reasoning behind it, you're just going to give yourself that chance to be more successful.